His two biggest tasks, really, are to explain to Trump this week why a quick deal that gives Russia what it wants is going to launch 100 new wars and actually damage the security of the US. And then he's got to explain Putin's consistent record of trashing treaties and that he just can't be trusted.
The Prime Minister, of course, announcing a hike up to defence spending. What does that mean for the war in Ukraine? Let's get more reaction now from Leigh Turner, who is a former British ambassador to Ukraine and author of Lessons in Diplomacy, Politics, Power and Parties. Leigh, a warm welcome to Times Radio. Thanks for being with us.
Evening, Kate.
So this defence spending's got to be a good thing for Ukraine, hasn't it? Does Keir Starmer look weak, though? Doing this reactively after the comments of Donald Trump about European nations not stepping up enough on defence spending?
I don't think that Keir Starmer looks weak making this announcement. I think it's a really good start when the Prime Minister talks about living in a dangerous new area, a dangerous new era. I mean, what could be more dangerous than the position that we now face? And it's good that the US seemed initially, at least, to have reacted positively to this. There's a quote from Pete Hegseth saying it's a strong step. But actually, the hard work for Keir Starmer still lies ahead. And I think this announcement will help him in a series of really quite daunting tasks he faces. He's got to not only raise spending, which is really difficult, and I think it's going to have to go up further. He's got to explain it to the British people, who, of course, want money to be spent on all kinds of things. And he's got to rebuild the relationship with the US. And his two biggest tasks, really, are to explain to Trump this week why a quick deal that gives Russia what it wants is going to launch 100 new wars and actually damage the security of the US. And then he's got to explain Putin's consistent record of trashing treaties and that he just can't be trusted.
Just explain further. I know it's something that you've said before, that a quick peace deal could initiate 100 more wars. Just expand on your reasoning for that, because there are two different viewpoints. To get peace as soon as possible, even if that is a ceasefire, so that the sort of long and to the issues that need to be drawn out, that need to be looked at in detail, can be done so for then lasting peace. And the other perspective is, don't give Russia a chance to regroup during a ceasefire because we can't trust them.
Absolutely right. Nobody wants war. Nobody wants killing. Everybody wants peace, of course. But there's a big difference between a ceasefire or a peace deal that gives Russia broadly what it's been trying to achieve through this war, which is a continuation of President Putin's presidency, which is forbidding Ukraine from joining NATO, which is allowing Russia to keep most of the territory it's got already, and a peace which constrains Russia and which punishes it for having launched a war of aggression. Now, if Russia is allowed to win this war, and it will win this war if it holds on to the Ukrainian territory it's got, and if Ukraine doesn't get cast iron security guarantees, and the cheapest and best way to give Ukraine those security guarantees is to let it join NATO. If Russia gets a victory of that kind, then three things will happen. First of all, Russia will attack Ukraine again in a few years, as it did after the peace deal in 2014. Secondly, Russia will threaten other countries. Maybe next time it'll be the Baltic states or Kazakhstan or Moldova. And the third thing is that every other country around the world with territorial ambitions, such as China, for example, or countries in South America, will start launching their own weapons, because they'll see Putin's victory, if he's allowed to have one, as opening the door to them launching wars of territorial expansion. And that will really mean that we are facing much, much higher defence expenditure than if we nip it in the bud now.
Yeah, so Donald Trump saying that he feels reassured that Putin wants to end the war. We need to feel dubious about that. But I mean, I was speaking I was speaking to the mayor of Kyiv, Klitschko, last night, and I asked him whether it was about victory for Ukraine or about achieving peace, about an end of a war. And he was very much leaning towards the end of a war and how we get there. And we know territory is a thorny issue, but it is unlikely that Russia are going to concede any territory to Ukraine, give any of it back, unless maybe some of it is in exchange for the areas of Russia which Ukraine occupy, like Kursk. The other issue is there is no way, I don't think anyone believes that Ukraine will become a part of NATO anytime soon. So although you set your stall out with those points and you say the only security guarantee would really be membership of NATO, there are other security guarantees that can be offered with the United States part of this negotiation that don't include membership of NATO. And I honestly think, Leigh, this is where this is the direction of travel. These things that in terms of territory and NATO membership, they have not served any of these negotiations so far. And it needs to be about a negotiated peace now. And so the conversation does need to simmer a bit, doesn't it? I think that, in terms of the US negotiation with Russia, yes, you can appear to be giving Russia everything they want, but there are ways to try and secure from the Ukrainian perspective here. I need to go quickly on this, but the rare minerals deal could see the US offer security guarantees in exchange for these rare earth metals, these critical minerals. Just explain how important that is. What are we actually talking about here? What do Ukraine have?
Well, two things, Kate. I'd like to come back to you on the point about territories and so on, but just to talk about rare earths first. It's an odd one because there are no rare earths being exploited in Ukraine at the moment. This is a deal for the long term, but it's clearly something that President Trump has identified as being something he can get from Ukraine and to come away looking like a guy who has an agenda and can achieve things. And there are reports I've just seen in the FT saying that Ukraine is now ready to agree to this deal, but it's a quite different deal from what the US first proposed. The $500 billion sum has disappeared and so on. So I think it will buy Zelensky some goodwill from the US and will help give them a bit more security if US companies are starting to get involved in exploiting those rare earths in Ukraine. But it's really a sideshow, I would say.
OK, all right. And very briefly, you wanted to come back to me on negotiations.
What we're seeing is that we've seen a series of Russian public rebukes to Trump over the last 48 hours. First of all, you will remember Trump saying that the Russians had agreed to have European troops on the ground. Today, Dmitry Peskov referred back to Foreign Minister Lavrov's statement saying that the presence of European peacekeepers were unacceptable. Similarly, Trump has said that Russia will give back some territory. And today we've heard from the Russians, no, they will not give back any territory. So really, the US needs to be pressuring Russia to make some concessions to get them into a constructive mindset. And I think really, after these disrespectful comments we've heard from the Russians, the best way would be for the US to make a couple of high-profile provisions of military equipment to Ukraine to show that there's two sides in this negotiation.
Leigh Turner, thank you, former British ambassador to Ukraine. Good to have you with us.